So happy to be here with you. Always love spending time with you. And just thinking that we've known each other for a while, probably close to 20 years. What keeps us coming back? What do you feel's the connection? Like, what is that?
It's a combination of things, I think. The topics and the spaces that you've been involved with have this connection to the Kumeyaay Nation, and then also the way you approach our community in just a genuine, down-to-earth, personable, respectful way, I think is opening for our people. You have this innate way about you to know how to respectfully enter a community and partner. So there's comfort and community and respect. I noticed that for us.
Well, I can definitely say I've always felt very welcome.
Good.
And I think that comfort in any relationship, goes both ways. And
Nice.
so I think, just super excited to work with the youth, and especially you specifically.
Nice.
Anything that involves like the kids and families. And I think there's so many ways to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really excited that, now here with the farm that we get to do this even more, and I think on more levels.
Definitely.
And what do you think's grown and what do you think's changed over that time? Because, thinking about like through a couple different organizations, I know I'm just thinking that, you've gone through your career professionally, I've gone through mine, but there's always this connection. Like, what do you think has changed most about our relationship in that time and just how we're able to work together?
Well, it's interesting because, we keep on doing the same thing we do. Obviously, education, community, wellness, those topics of identity and community always tie back to things you have always been involved with. So I think you've had a lot more change probably than we have. But how does that bring you back to us?
Yeah, it's funny because, I think that even going from the time of the Museum of Man and now now the Museum of Us.
Yeah.
And there was kind of a natural thing there in terms of working with tribal communities throughout the region. But then when I went to the Children's Museum, I was kind of wondering, like, I built, there's these relationships there, and I wasn't really sure how that would plug in. And I think it was really nice when, I'd start to get phone calls or I'd meet people, and it was like, bring the kids to the Children's Museum. And that natural open relationship just felt really good and having an interest. But I think now with the farm, it's really exciting, especially, we started to do these like food donation programs into the community. But now the idea of like some of these new projects, to where it's not just about bringing food out in the community, but how can we help the community grow food?
Right.
And also bring the kids out to the farm so they can learn how to grow food.
Right.
And the health and wellness components.
I think that's, you just touched on a lot of things, but Museum of Man is like so much of our identity from the past. And, our children and the Children's Museum is so much about, our future. And then, but it's nice to now have the wellness and the garden and the nutrition aspect because of the present, because we're still here. And so your background with the Museum of Man gave you a whole foundation for who we are. So you already kind of knew who we are working there, and all the past and our ancestors and our connection to San Diego and the surrounding areas. I like that we're now full circle to the present and the work that needs to be done, and the essence of a community and keeping that community whole and healthy. So that's been great for us.
I'm so excited about what's coming up.
Yeah, me too.
So going further with our little program here, what would you want to ask me?
So a lot, because I'm not familiar. Well, I mean, farming is always in our community, but being on the reservation, we have some challenges. But it's interesting to know about regenerative agriculture. Tell me about that and how that's part of making a more just society, or what's your mission and outreach into the community?
Well, it's interesting because when I came to the farm, in terms of because honestly, I wasn't, I've had these careers. I wasn't a farmer when I came. So, I'm gonna be honest. I was learning about regenerative agriculture myself as I came to the farm. But really, ultimately, it's about, when we think about farming, a lot of times I think people think about food and they think about the land, but then also, it's about caring for people and planet.
Right.
And we're all connected to that.
Right.
And I think there's so much interest right now in terms of growing food in a sustainable way that's not using harmful pesticides and fertilizers, but also, in the foods we grow that might be culturally appropriate, and they might be something that recognizes of growing foods that are traditional to that land, and also acknowledging how native plants and pollinators can help growing the food and so on. And it was really cool. I mean, you came out for, when we showed one of our recent films at the farm, and it was, about tribal food sovereignty.
Right.
And I think there's so much that can be taught and learned around how we grow food. And so I'm really excited that there's an interest in how we can support and partner to actually bring some of that knowledge of how we're growing in a sustainable way from the farm and actually bring it to the community, bring it to San Pasqual, bring it to Campo, bring it to some of the other tribal reservations.
Nice.
Super exciting.
I think you were just getting to what I was thinking about. How does that connection to people, land, and food, how you just described, how does it, you kind of touched on it in relating to building a better future?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, it's so critical now more than ever. And I think, around any kind of educational programming that's going to bring awareness, not just for the adults, but really for the youth, for children. And, they are going to inherit everything that we've done to this planet and everything going forward. Right. So we really want to position them well. And I think going back to the tribal food sovereignty side of it, and maybe you can even speak to this more, maybe that little bit of history, the lands where the reservations are not necessarily the only lands, right? Like how, maybe just so people can understand that piece of the history, why the reservations are there. Because when we talk about, the diversity of foods and sustainability in the region, and it was thriving. Right. And now where people are kind of positioned where they're needing to survive. Right.
It's a good description of the reservations, because we did have the whole region before contact, and San Diego's so rich and biodiverse, and that's what sustained the Kumeyaay people for, they were very healthy people before contact. After contact, it was a difficult time. And now we're not able to, gather in our traditional areas or have the villages that we did, or travel down to the ocean for certain times of years. And so we're trying to bring that back, because our health has suffered as a result of the past, 400 years. The difference we've in our history had Kumeyays that have lived into their past hundreds, 120, and that is the knowledge, the traditional knowledge, and the foods they ate, and everything that San Diego can provide. I think when people come into San Diego, they look at the chaparral and the sagebrush as weeds and not important. And we have this traditional knowledge where it sustained us and we thrived. So being on the reservation, as we saw earlier, San Pasqual Valley is our traditional Indian village, rich farmland with a river that used to run through there. A lot of waterways that don't exist anymore in San Diego, but those were our natural areas where we processed our foods and gathered and had our villages. But being on the reservation, now we're in more desolate, I described it to you earlier, granite, rock.
And that was not by choice.
Not by choice.
Because oftentimes when people say San Pasqual, it's like, oh yeah, San Pasqual. I know where the reservation is. Like, no.
It is a different San Pasqual now. San Pasqual that we were removed from our rich farmland and by the waterways into, and there's a historian that wrote a book, Pushed into the Rocks, because basically we are pushed into the rocks. And so we are on granite. It's very difficult to cultivate. It's very difficult. We were intended to sustain ourselves as farmers when we were placed on these reservations, but not having the water and the soil and the means to do that. So I think going full circle and being able to have that ability to do that is important still.
Which is super fun, right? With the project that we're talking about.
And kids will love it. They'll learn about nutrition, and it can kind of be more of a reality where we're self-sustained instead of reliant on outside or reliant on, we can be self-sufficient.
So I'm going to share with our listeners here, so what we're talking about is a project where just kind of being open, because there is this relationship of trust, right? And just being open to what can come. And so when we first came out to visit, and we were like, oh, great, let's get the kids to, come to the farm and, come out and see what you're doing. You have a propagation house there, native plant trail, and so on. But we went out there and realized, oh my gosh, like you all are like interested in growing food there. And so what we're doing now is, planning up to have garden beds and a small farm operation of sorts right there, adjacent to the education center.
Right.
Engaging college youth from SDSU and our farm team, and bringing in that knowledge of farming and growing to see how we can collaborate and create this kind of holistic view of how do you grow food,
right? What's
involved, creating those education, and I would even say career opportunities.
True.
Right?
Very true.
For youth.
Very true. It's a whole nother education in itself, but to do that at young ages and then in a community setting, I know the older kids are excited to know what you do and deliver food to the elders on the different reservations. They're very interested in doing that, taking care of their elders and the people, but also just an opportunity to teach them that this is possible. This is possible.
I think we talk about how, I see funders in the community wanting to get involved, and I think, we were having a conversation just earlier today about what that looks like and how we can conceive and identify a need in the community that's truly meaneful, that's truly impactful, and how people can get involved and support. What do you feel are some of those needs that you're facing in the community that are both either addressed by some of the projects that we've been talking about, or other needs that you see, through the eyes of the education center?
Yeah. I mean, educationally, it's going to be amazing. I know that our young people are interested, and then they can find the connection with how it could actually, heal our community. Just in that transition from being disconnected with nature in that way and rebuilding that connection with earth, with the seasons, with all of these things that go along with gardening and the plants and everything that's around us, and learning about their own traditional foods with native plants at the same time, and how our people have been, suffering. Diabetes is huge. And then all the ailments that go along with not having that holistic diet, and bringing that into the community. I think everybody's excited for, and it'll open your eyes that you can take these things and heal your community. And there are people that are interested, like you're talking about. There are people that want to assist with those things that have been broken and hurt over history, and rebuild and heal those things.
So good. And I think about, we started, thanks to, it was actually the Food Funders Group at San Diego Grant Makers, now Catalyst, that first gave us the financial support to incorporate bringing food to American Indian Health Center and out to the Ipai Nation of San Isabel. But just to see how that's blossomed, and that initial seed funding, again, from Catalyst and the Food Funders Group, has really allowed us to take that project into like year 2 and expand it in all these different directions.
Yeah.
And it's just exciting to me to think about what that will bring and if it can meet some of those bigger needs in the community. You know, as I was just thinking a second ago, language and food, that kind of connects.
Yes.
That's like if you're connecting food and you're focusing on language, that's a big part of any culture, any community.
Definitely. It's the foundation. So to have that present, to heal, to be part of that in education and part of that in community, it is. I agree.
So when working towards change, what do you value about being part of a network of individuals and institutions like Catalyst? So when working towards change, what do you value about being part of a network of these individuals and organizations that can kind of like address things across the spectrum of needs in the community?
So
and bring in resources.
You've touched on a couple of things. I mean, I think the Kumeyaay people have a lot to offer the whole region on how we sustained ourselves, trends that are going into the future. We were stewards of this land, and we see the issues with, you know, a lot of different issues across the board with, you know, the fires that we have now, with taking care of, still being good stewards of the land, but looking at it from maybe a Kumeyaay perspective in the traditional way, and sharing that with the San Diego region, sharing that with the larger community, having an opportunity to say this is who we are and we have sustained ourselves for this long, and this knowledge has sustained us, to share that and who we are in our history, and for people to come into San Diego and have that, or be San Diego residents and know that, I think is part of our goal, because we've been here for thousands and thousands of years in comparison to a few hundred years. So we like that opportunity. We think we have a lot to share with the region and share of who we are. And we really appreciate that people are now taking interest in knowing, you know, these people are the first people of this area. You know, San Diego is probably one of the best places to live in the world, and learn from the people who are first there, have been here, who have survived all this time, is a story to tell. And our mission is to not only sustain our community, but help them thrive, preserve our culture. So in these opportunities and partnerships, I think that it gives us an opportunity where students and the community can feel pride in who they are, and come full circle with that after the difficulties of our ancestors and our grandparents and great-grandparents. You know, they suffered for a reason, so now we're able to thrive. And that's where I see kind of the exchange and the work together.
Yeah, I think for organizations, and albeit funders or nonprofits or businesses that want to get involved, I think it goes back to what this, you know, the notion of all in, right? And like to be truthful about your intentions. As I was taught early on, as I shared that story of being aware of what you're able to do and you're not able to do, be truthful to your limitations, be truthful to who you are, you know, say bring your authentic self. And then good things can come, you know, but it does start with that relationship, as we know.
It does. And I think that's what's maintained our relationship too. Exactly what you described.
Absolutely. Thank you.